Hi there, Infernal here. So, I decided I want to do a more conversational video talking about my top 10 games that had probably the biggest influence on my taste as a gamer. And I would like to start out with my games that were runners-up, honorable mentions if you will, but didn't quite make the cut, which of course means they are fantastic games in their own right, but just didn't quite make that top 10. So I'm just going to go ahead and start with the honorable mentions first. First of all, Elden Ring. Now, the influence overall of Elden Ring cannot be denied, and objectively, I would say that it's probably the best game overall that From Software has done, but it's not quite my favorite. I will say that it helped me like open world games because probably I already liked the Souls formula and it was kind of thrust into an open world environment. But I think more so it's that it was a culmination of everything From Software learned going on from Demon's Souls to the current era. So it kind of combines all the great parts of it and makes it a cohesive package that I love. And in fact, it's a game that I have loved more over time now and have appreciated it more over time. So I actually like it more than I did when I first got it, amazingly. And I think one of the things that helps me like it so much is just seeing how many different combinations of builds you can have, which they expanded on far more than the Souls trilogy. So, like I said, still put Elden Ring pretty high though. Next would be Shadow of the Colossus, which should be no surprise given the content of my channel, but probably one of the better games to capture a specific mood and atmosphere, and with some fantastic art direction that still carries over even in the modern era. Now, I know there's a remake technically, but I'm here to say that I firmly believe that the original PS2 version holds up just as well because of, again, the fantastic art direction in it. And it's such a quiet, contemplative experience that really just blew me away when I first played it. And if there's ever any like argument that video games aren't art, then that would be one of the first exhibits I'd point people to. Next would be Gunstar Heroes. Gunstar Heroes is one of my favorite really running gun games ever, and just a fantastic co-op experience. Probably my favorite game on the Sega Genesis, actually, which I did mention in my top Sega Genesis games video, because it's just, first of all, it's a fantastic looking game, great pixel art, super colorful, but I think what really takes it home are the customizable weapons that you can have, where you can combine the powers of two different weapons at a time and actually get a lot of different kind of combinations by doing that. And even just like the experimentation of that combined with a really solid run and gun platforming mechanics are just what really makes it a great game, and still worth playing today in my opinion. It's also a great way to knock out like a couple of hours because it's pretty short, but it's filled to the brim. Then we have Dark Souls, and I was debating putting this on my top 10 because it's so influential and it's just such a big, important game for a lot of reasons. But I just think that there's others I like more, but I cannot deny its influence, and especially the influence it had on me, because I love the Souls games, I love the Soulsborne genre, and I owe it a lot to that game, actually. It wasn't my first, I should clarify, but it actually to this day has my favorite interconnected world compared to the other ones. And I think it's just an achievement for that alone. So then I would say Final Fantasy Tactics, another, maybe my favorite strategy RPG ever. And I think it's one of those games that was, at the time it came out, it was a little bit of a sleeper hit for me because I didn't know how they were going to combine the sort of feeling of Final Fantasy with a tactical RPG, but I think they really achieved it. And I know it's based on a lot of systems that were there before, like stuff like Shining Force and also the Ogre Battle series, actually Tactics Ogre rather, sorry. But I think it stands on its own and it has a pretty good challenge overall. I think I love the Fire Emblem games, but I think they tend to be on much more the easier side. And I think Final Fantasy Tactics is kind of a good middle ground difficulty and really just a great achievement in strategy RPGs. And then last runner-up, Mega Man X. Again, I had a lot of Mega Man games that I thought of putting here, but I think that Mega Man X is kind of like how Dark Souls and Elden Ring, well, especially Elden Ring, were kind of a culmination of what was learned by the developers over time. I feel like that about Mega Man X. Like, it's all the best parts of what I love about the early Mega Man games, but just kind of put into this like explosive package. Amazing music, by the way, and just I love getting the upgrades, and also how you can kind of challenge yourself by playing the game without getting the upgrades is really cool. And I think that it's kind of a deeper game than it appears on its surface, and that's what I love about it too. All right, so let's get into my top 10. Again, my personal opinion, and I'd like to clarify that this, I feel, is more of a top 10 games that had the biggest impact on me, that really solidified my tastes and were the games that I still think about all the time. So I'm going to start with Metal Gear Solid 3. And I feel that this game is not only the best Metal Gear game, but also just a huge achievement for Kojima in general. Because it's just such a game that, even beyond the incredibly complex story elements, is very mechanically deep. And I really love games that kind of let you get lost in their systems and mechanics. And especially games where there's just dozens of ways to kind of solve every encounter. And I think that that was being present in the first two Metal Gear games, but it really just took it home in 3. And I love kind of the origin stories of some of the characters that became mainstays in the franchise, and I also just love it as a game. I think it's just a great game to play through and to challenge yourself in it. And I should clarify, I have not played Delta yet, so I can't really give like an honest opinion of that yet, but I will say that I would still put the original on my top 10. And so next is probably not a huge surprise, but I would say Ico. Ico is such an important game to me. I like it more than Shadow of the Colossus, and again, I think Shadow of the Colossus is easily one of the best games ever made, but maybe it's because Ico I played first, and it struck me so much. It just really hit an emotional core to me, where it made me think about the way games could actually be made. And this is, coming from someone that grew up with the NES, being able to see this game that had that kind of scope and an idea behind it is what really blew my mind. And again, it's just like I really loved seeing the potential of games as artistry and seeing the potential of that kind of explored in Ico. Okay, so next we have Super Mario Bros. 3. And I keep coming back to this game, and it's funny because I think about how much, like how easy it would be to pick nearly any even modern Mario games that are all fantastic. Like Mario Odyssey is fantastic. Super Mario 64 was a huge genre-defining game. But I keep coming back to Mario Bros. 3, and I think part of it is definitely nostalgia and kind of the fact that I played it when it came out. And the hype for it at the time, by the way, was unreal. But I think it's just something to do with I'm in love with the way that the world structure of that game is. And I know Super Mario World kind of did this too, but I really liked how different each world was from each other. And it's also to this day the one that seems to have the most kind of choices in the different suits. And I think that was something that I really loved. And there's just like so many different ways to beat it. You can kind of speed run it with the whistles, or you can kind of go world to world. And I just honestly never get tired of that game. All right, so next we have Bloodborne. This is the Souls game that makes my list. And I thought about this. It's definitely a smaller game than arguably even some of the Souls games. And yes, it's limited by the frame rate, and yes, it's stuck on Sony consoles. But it's the game that I nevertheless have to play once a year still. And I think it just captures like that mystery and that feeling in me better, a little bit better than the Souls games do. And it's got to be the Victorian setting that does it for me. And I love the using guns as parries system is so cool. The trick weapons are awesome and is a system I wish they had done in other Souls games. But overall, there's just such a good gameplay loop with Bloodborne. It's so fast-paced, and especially compared to Dark Souls 1. But I think it's just the combination of the speed of it with the atmosphere and the mood just makes it my favorite Soulsborne game still. All right, so next we have Silent Hill 2. And this one I have played the remake of. So I actually put the remake almost on the same level. I think I would still say that the original hit that feeling just a little bit better for me. And I think the problem is just in the way it presents the game itself, because the remake is definitely a more modernized version, and it kind of does that over-the-shoulder view that has been popularized in the recent Resident Evil games, which really works well for those. But something about that freneticness combined with how I usually feel about Silent Hill 2 is just almost like the pacing just feels slightly off to me. But I do think it's a fantastic game and still worth playing. Either way, I do think that the original Silent Hill 2 is just maybe my favorite horror game ever too. And I think it's just the way that it combines this slow burn kind of tension horror, which is the kind of horror I like better anyway, combined with this almost like liminal abstract architecture that is just mind-blowing to me. I could not get over also how good I thought that game looked when it came out, and I still think it's even worth playing today. All right, so speaking of horror games, my favorite Resident Evil game next, which is the Resident Evil 1 remake. And I can go either way on HD or the original GameCube release for this. I played the original GameCube release when it came out, and I played all versions of it, I guess, but I think that this is just my favorite Resident Evil game, and it maybe will always be, because I think it's just captures the way that I feel that Resident Evil is supposed to feel like, if that makes sense. Where it's like, there's the campiness to it, it's clearly an homage to a lot of slasher flicks and 80s horror combined in this kind of haunted house setting. So it's like all those tropes combined. And then the remake of it really pushed the fidelity of some of the environments to where, like, there's parts that are legitimately scary still to it, mostly in how it controls the camera. But it's a game that still looks incredible, especially for its age, and I think it's because of the amazing craft that went into the backgrounds. They're pre-rendered, but they move and they feel alive. Like, they feel like they're meant to be interacted with. I just think that I love the Resident Evil games. I think 2 is pretty high up there, and the remake of 2 is great too. But I just think that is like the perfect Resident Evil game for me. And I think again, may always feel that way. That's why I know there's been talk of remaking that again, remaking 1 again, and I don't think it needs a remake, but that's just me. All right. So next we have Final Fantasy VI. I went back and forth about a lot of Final Fantasy games, to be honest, because I especially like the earlier ones and the PlayStation 1 era ones a lot. Final Fantasy VI, though, it is so good at its scope. And, like, granted, it's a much smaller game than modern RPGs when you compare it, but it feels big, and I think that's kind of the important part of it. It also balances having a ton of characters pretty well. I mean, yes, there's some kind of standouts that have kind of become sort of, cardboard cutouts personality-wise, but other than that, compared to especially games that tried to handle a lot of characters well and don't do it as well, I think that Final Fantasy VI really does it well. But I really like the setting, and I think that is something we kind of lost a little bit, because it's literally struggling between, like, it's a bridge between the sword and sorcery, like, pure fantasy Final Fantasies of, like, the older ones, and then kind of bridging that between the direction that it went later, which is kind of like pure sci-fi in a way. And I know that some more recent ones, like Final Fantasy 16, kind of went back to that medieval setting again, but I loved how it was kind of this, like, Industrial Revolution era thing, and I just think that it really holds up, especially, like, the soundtrack is still amazing. And I love that it didn't really pull punches in its story. Like, it kind of let this really dark apocalypse happen around it, where, like, the stakes were so high that they actually collapsed. And I just applaud it for kind of taking that kind of risk too. All right, so next, my favorite Zelda game, A Link to the Past. This is the format of Zelda I like the best. I like it when the game is a little bit more linear, not as open world. I mean, technically it's an open world in the sense that you can tackle the dungeons in different orders, but the dungeons are built so that you need to use the item you receive in them to solve those problems in the dungeons. And it's just crafted very tightly, and I think it's just, like, the perfect example of the kinds of puzzle solving that I like in Zelda games a lot. And it's also really charming as a game too. I really like, and I think Zelda games are pretty charming in general, but I just really like that specific Super NES graphic style of Zelda in that way. And it just is really replayable for me, especially if you use mods that kind of do randomizers and things like that. But yeah, I think that's my favorite Zelda game. Okay, and then nearing the end here, we have Chrono Trigger. And again, this is a game where I've never grown tired of it. But I think it also, at the time, it showed me what we can do with RPGs, especially JRPGs, which are the ones I kind of grew up with more. And it was like, it's funny because it's actually a pretty short game compared to even compared to like Final Fantasy VI, for example. But it does not waste any time. And I think that's one of the things I appreciate about games in general, is if they don't waste the player's time and they respect it and there's no like wasted moments in it. Everything feels very intentional and very crafted. And that's what I love the most about Chrono Trigger. And it's just, I think it's insane how well Toriyama's art style works with that. I mean, yes, you could argue that everyone kind of looks like a variation of Dragon Ball characters, but I think that it actually, like, that style fits it so well. And I love that they kind of like even translated that to kind of the pixel art style in it. Yet again, another game that has just like an incredible soundtrack. It never got eclipsed by its sequel, which I love Chrono Cross, but it's just not there for me in terms of how good Chrono Trigger really is. It's clearly an influence on a lot of people, and you can see it in even modern indie titles too. So I think Chrono Trigger just will forever remain in my top 10. Okay, so number 1, Super Metroid. I think, again, this is probably one that's not a huge surprise given how often I talk about it on this channel, but it is my favorite game, and it's like a masterclass on how to handle atmosphere, especially in a 2D game. And I think the fact that it can make you feel that way, even with like sort of what you could consider limitations of the hardware now. I mean, at the time it was pretty cutting edge, but the things that it achieves with what it has is just incredible to me. And it's like the combination of how the music, sound effects, and environmental layout works are just like unheard of in a sense. I just love that game so much, and another game that I play yearly now. And I wouldn't say that I necessarily have anything that would surprise me in the game anymore, but it's like a game that I like to play to experience over and over again, if that makes sense. And I think, and again, there's a reason why it essentially, that and Symphony of the Night launched so many in that genre, because it's just so important for that genre, and it's just such a template for it as well. So yeah, again, that is my favorite game of all time. All right, well, thanks for checking out my top 10 games that had the biggest impact on me. And I would like to also go and switch around and do some videos that have more of the essay style, but I like shaking it up every now and then and just getting out the games that I really like to play as well. So until next time, I'll see you guys later.